All right, Meg, thanks so much. Let's go to our political panel now. We have Maria Cardona. She is a CNN political commentator and Democratic strategist, and Alice Stewart. She is a CNN political commentator and Republican strategist. Good to see you both, ladies. Hard not to notice.
Hi, Rahel.
Hey, guys. Hard not to notice in Meg's piece there the emotion of that Florida woman who was talking about her health challenges and why she needed to get an abortion, according to her interview. Alice, I want to read for you something Trump said in this interview with Time. So he was asked, do you think states should monitor women's pregnancies so they can know if they've gotten an abortion after the ban? Trump says, I think they might do that. Again, you'll have to speak to the individual states. Alice, obviously this is something that Trump continues to do, punt the issue back to the states. I'm wondering if you think this is enough distance for Trump from the issue, or does this come back to hurt him?
Look, this is a very emotional issue. We can all agree on that. But I think what President Trump has been doing since Roe v. Wade was overturned is recognizing the reality of the post-Roe world. And while he has been extremely pro-life and nominating justices to the Supreme Court that overturned Roe v. Wade, the reality is whenever this issue is on the ballot in states, the pro-abortion crowd has won. And what he is saying here is that, look, the effort by the pro-life community for the past 50 years was to take this difficult decision out of the hands of 9 unelected justices and put it in the hands of the states. Now it's in the hands of the states. And the current law that is going into effect in Florida was passed as the will of the elected officials of the people of Florida. And if the sentiment has changed and the idea and the concerns about abortion have changed, they have the opportunity to go to the ballot in November and vote on this issue. And I think Republicans would be better served having a more nuanced position on this and talking about abortion limits and not abortion bans, and making sure we educate people that laws like the one in Florida do have exceptions for rape, incest, and life of the mother. And that's an important component of this very emotional issue.
Maria, let me ask, abortion access is supposed to be an issue that is a winning issue for Biden. And yet, in our new CNN polling, a majority of people polled actually say they disapprove of Biden's handling of abortion policy. What do you make of that?
I think a lot of those folks are people who want to have Roe v. Wade codified legislatively. And so when they don't see that happen, you know, they're going to blame the guy at the top, which tells me that this is absolutely will continue to be, as it has been already, Rahel, as you have seen in elections past, this will continue to be a huge benefit for President Biden and Democrats electorally, because as long as Republicans feel like my dear friend Alice feels, that this decision should be in the hands of the states, they're going to keep losing, because you know what? This decision should be in no one's hands except the hands of the woman who needs the abortion for her reproductive health, who needs the abortion perhaps to live, who needs the abortion perhaps in order to keep her reproductive health intact, who needs the abortion because she wants it. This is about bodily autonomy. This is about rights and freedoms. This is about one party wanting to take away a right and a freedom that women used to enjoy before Roe v. Wade, and the vast majority of women, who's the largest electorate in this country, saying, no, we do not want to grow up. We don't want to live a country where our daughters will grow up with less rights than we did. So as long as Republicans don't understand that, this issue will continue to be political and electoral kryptonite for them.
Alice, let me switch gears here and ask about these campus protests. Obviously, Biden has had some issues with mobilizing young voters, and now you have these campus protests which show no signs of dying down. Republicans had been hoping to maybe pounce on this issue and attack Biden on this issue. And just hours ago, Marjorie Taylor Greene announced that she's going to be, she plans to call for a vote to oust the speaker, Mike Johnson. Is this a mistake? Is this a mistake to be sort of going down that road when Republicans, at least according to them, thought they had an opportunity to attack Biden on this issue?
Well, they will. Marjorie Taylor Greene is on an island. She's not going to get the support on that motion. And thankfully, even Democrats are going to help quash this effort before it takes ground. Because look, this issue on college campuses, the turmoil and the protest and the frustration has been simmering for for weeks and months now. And look, this is all a result of President Biden's handling of the Hamas invasion of Israel and the deep division in the Democratic Party and those in the Democratic Party who are anti-Israel and are espousing anti-Semitic views, and that is permeating on college campuses. And thumbs down to the way Columbia University handled this from the very beginning. And I appreciate New York City police officers for going in and taking charge of this. We heard New York Mayor Eric Adams saying, yes, this is a global effort to radicalize college students, but these universities should have taken steps long ago. And the reality is these young voters on both sides of this critical issue are frustrated with Joe Biden. Jewish students, young students that I speak with every day, they have been fearful on their college campuses. They are fearful of the anti-Semitic rhetoric that they're seeing and hearing. And then you have those on the other side, the anti-Israel students who are frustrated that Joe Biden didn't do more to support Palestinians from the very beginning. So he is losing tremendous support from young voters on this issue, as we have seen also on the abortion issue. He's losing support across the board on the economy, as well as the border and national security. So he is doing everything he can possibly do to shore up these younger voters. But as we're seeing on college campuses, they are frustrated.
Maria, your response, I want to give you the last word here. I mean, what are Biden's options in terms of dealing with these protests on campuses? I mean, what does he need to say? I mean, obviously tensions and sensitivities are high on both sides of the issue.
Right. There's no question about that, Rahel. And there's no question that this is an emotional issue. It's a tough issue. And it's certainly a challenge. But what President Biden needs to continue to do is to say two foundational things. The first one is that we are a country that is based on the law. And part of that law is allowing peaceful protests. Underscore peaceful. So he is saying that, allowing the people who are wanting to have their voice heard on the huge sentimental, emotional issue about what's going on with Palestinians in the war against Israel. And he continues to do that, continues to listen to that important commentary. On the other side, he is absolutely disavowing violence, hatred, anti-Semitism, any kind of language that causes that. And I think the contrast with those two things, Rahel, with Donald Trump is an important one. Donald Trump, who has already said he wants to bring in the National Guard, we know how he would treat protesters, bashing their heads in. And at the same time, he is the only one of the two who has supported white supremacists, who has not only not disavowed hatred, the kind of language that white supremacists talk about, but he has encouraged it. He has encouraged it to the point where we saw on January 6th, the Capitol rioters come in, attack the Capitol, kill police, and want to overturn a fair and free election at Donald Trump's bidding. So I think that contrast, Rahel, is an important one to keep in mind as we move forward with those two very critical issues that, frankly, are not just foundational in the country, but are foundational for our democracy.
Yeah, certainly critical issues. Well, I thank you both, Maria Cardona and Alice Stewart. Thank you, ladies.
Thanks,
We're
Rahel.
going to take a quick break. Yep.